Cassidy Caron is a past president of the Metis National Council. She also played an important role in getting these artifacts returned to Canada and in time to their respective communities. Cassidy, good to see you again. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
So you are credited for pressing the late Pope Francis to have these items returned. Can you tell us a bit about how that happened? Because you did lead this mission of Métis residential school survivors to the Vatican. But how did you learn about these items that were being held by the Vatican?
Sure. I wouldn't say I'm credited for doing this. There's a lot of credit that has to go to Métis and First Nations and Inuit survivors of residential schools who have been advocating, well, first for the apology from Pope Francis, and then alongside actions that would follow that apology. And one of those being the return of items that were held in any Vatican institutions. For me, I learned that there were Métis specific items that were held in these institutions when I was doing consultations with community members prior to the delegation that I led in 2022 to the Vatican. Community members brought it to my attention and told me that it must be on our list at the Metis National Council to advocate for the return, the repatriation of these ancestral objects. And so that's what we did in 2022, and then had the opportunity to actually visit the Anima Mundi Museum in 2022 while we were in Rome and the Vatican. A select few items were presented to us at that time. So I was able to see with my own eyes that, of course, there were First Nations, Métis, and Inuit items held at the Anima Mundi Museum.
Mm-hmm. A select few, as you say, and we're going to get to that in a bit when in relation to the 62 that have now made their way back to Canada. But the Vatican has been hesitant to return artifacts to their communities of origin in the past. What changed in this case, do you think?
This was the result of the relationship building and the immense amount of time that Pope Francis actually spent listening to the stories of residential school survivors here in Canada and the delegations that traveled to the Vatican in 2022. I believe it was largely due to that relationship building and the stories that they shared with Pope Francis. Him as a human being really heard what has taken place in Canada's history and the role of the Catholic Church, and he was compelled to do something. So this was an initiative that he began prior to his passing, and Pope Leo carried it forward, knowing that this was something that was important to Pope Francis.
How does the return of these artifacts further reconciliation? Because that has been noted, but for people that don't necessarily make the connection, how does it actually do that?
So these ancestral objects are more than just objects. They hold our stories. They hold significance to our communities in ways that are so important that they can't just be held, overseas. For our future generations to be able to access and see and feel these items and know the stories behind them while they are back here on our homelands is so incredibly important. It's something that needs to continue. This is just the beginning of these repatriation efforts, and it's a start, but it is extremely important and a good step forward in reconciliation.
Okay, let me pick up on that point then, because you talked about how you were allowed to see a select few items when you're actually at the Vatican. But here we have 62 artifacts now back on Canadian soil. Again, they'll be repatriated to their communities in time as things are sorted through. But there are apparently more at the Vatican. So what's next?
So for the Métis National Council, President Pruden will be continuing efforts to build relationships with the Anima Mundi Museum, with officials within the Vatican, with Pope Leo himself, to be able to do more. We know that there are more Métis-specific items held within the museum. There has to be a significant amount of work to educate museum officials about the history of these items, the history of the Métis Nation, and really do the work to catalog the items. We don't know specifically how many items are held over there. So there's a lot of work left to do. So I know President Pruden at the Metis National Council will be continuing efforts to do just that.
Now, the efforts did begin with the late Pope Francis, and since his passing, it is now Pope Leo. As you said, Pope Leo picked up where Pope Francis left off. But do you think that that will mean beyond these 62 artifacts as well?
I certainly hope so. I know, again, President Pruden was able to go to the Pope Leo's inaugural mass and have the opportunity to continue those relationship building efforts. We know that Pope Francis also, when he apologized, he tasked the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops to carry forward the work and the actions that are remaining on the journey of reconciliation. And so, in partnership with the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops and the relations that we still have over at the Vatican with specific cardinals and different officials, we're hopeful that this work can continue.
Cassidy Caron, as I said off camera, I always appreciate the time that I get to speak with you. Thank you for this.
Thank you very much, Michael. Great to see you.